There's so much interest in Nigeria's election. The world is watching. The bigger economies and democracies are also paying very close attention to this election of Saturday. And tonight we'll be getting to check with the British government on their interest and perhaps how they're supporting Nigeria in this Saturday's election. I'm being joined by the British High Commissioner to Nigeria, Katrina Lang. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
It's a great pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. How do you feel? I mean, you've been here for a few years. Now Nigeria is going to a very crucial election. First and foremost, what have you observed in the preparations to the polls?
So, as you say, I've been here nearly 4.5 years, which is quite unusually long, but I particularly wanted to be here for 2 election cycle. So I arrived just before the previous election, and I'll be leaving soon after this one. So the first thing I'd observed is how different this election feels, actually, to the last one. There feels much more engagement, particularly amongst the youth, and we've seen that reflected in the much higher represent people who've registered to vote, who've collecting their PVC cards. Obviously, you need to actually go out and vote on the day, and I would urge them all to do so. I think the second thing is the passing of the Electoral Act, which enables electronic transmission of votes, which also partly accounts, I think, for that increased engagement of the youth. And obviously we have a bigger race this time. There's at least 3 candidates, if not 4, as well as many other smaller parties participating. So that's creating a real sense of energy and enthusiasm and engagement. So that's all very positive. There are some challenges. Nigeria is a huge democracy, a huge country, getting all the logistics in place for an election to run smoothly and credibly on the day. But I think we've been impressed with what INEC has done so far, and they've told us they are ready. And obviously the security on the day, it's very important the security forces do their job, impartially providing a secure environment for people to vote. So still a few days to go, and we're all on tenterhooks. I mean, it really is a close race. I think we're all becoming obsessed with Nigerian politics, but we hope for the best.
Yeah, as you have observed, that Nigerians are very confident people. They don't like to be told what to do. But there's a lot of lesson to learn from much older democracies. But how would you, or what would you say you've observed with the manner in which politicians have comported themselves?
So I think, Nigeria's on a democratic journey, but it's really commendable that you've stuck with it since 1999. And as you mentioned earlier, that can't be said for all countries in this region, where we've seen quite a lot of democratic backsliding with coups, with presidents refusing to step down after their term. There's never been any question of that in Nigeria. The 2 times 4 years term has been stuck to. But President Buhari himself has said he feels his most important legacy is a credible and peaceful election. So I think that's all very, very positive. That's not to say there aren't challenges. Each election we hope to see some improvements. What would be very worrying would be to see backsliding on that democratic journey. But I am confident, and I think the people of Nigeria are confident, certainly many of the youth who I've spoken to feel much more confident this time that their vote will count because it's protected through the BVAS, the electronic transmission of votes, and because there's more choice for them. You know, there's candidates they feel they can relate to. So nothing's perfect. No democracy in the world is perfect. In the UK, we have challenges, we learn. But Nigeria's on that journey, on a progressive journey, and the world is indeed watching this election.
What do you think would be the impact of much younger voters? I mean, you said you've observed that there are more enthusiasm between the younger demography. What do you think could be the impact or the implication of that?
Well, I think the message to the youth is if you actually go and turn out to vote, you know, 50% of this population is under 18. There are at least 9.5 million new registered voters, and I think 75% of them are in that 18 to 35 bracket. You could potentially change the outcome of this election. I'm not assuming who they're going to vote for, but the point is their vote will count. So there's a few days to go, so it's been encouraging. People have registered, picking up their cards, but of course the only poll that counts is on the day, so people do need to go out, and that will determine who the winner will be, because the winner will determine on who actually votes on the day. So I would urge them all to complete their journey and go out and vote, and don't feel intimidated. It's really important that people feel they can vote peacefully.
What do you think about the quality of some of the candidates, the top ones?
Well, we've engaged with all the big four, as you might say, but I've met some of the smaller parties as well. We know them well, and like Channels TV, we're not backing any particular candidate. We can work with anybody who wins this election because that will be the choice of the people of Nigeria. I think whoever comes in is going to have an enormous set of challenges on the economy, on security. So what we've urged all of the presidential aspirants to do is to take bold, early action on those, particularly on the economy, because if the economy functions, the security environment will also improve, because much of the insecurity I think we see is related to joblessness, livelihoods, young men in particular, not having an alternative viable livelihood. So the two are very much linked. So we on the day when we see who comes out, assuming there's not a runoff, we stand ready to work with whoever comes through.
The Brexit in the UK is perhaps one thing that most politicians in the UK perhaps will be biting their fingers about, an experience that if a lot of leaders in your country think again about, if they had the opportunity to perhaps rethink their decision, maybe they would have acted differently about the choice of getting a popular vote on that kind of decision that a lot of political analysts across the globe say you don't leave to a popular opinion to determine such a very important decision or a matter in the life of a country as the UK. Looking back at that kind of experience, that's a lot of lesson to learn. If you take that and transpose it into Nigerian experience, what lesson do you think we could learn from some of the missteps of your country, your democracy?
Well, I wouldn't call them missteps. I mean, I think the Brexit referendum, like the Scottish referendum, was a choice that was put to the people of the United Kingdom and in Scotland to determine what kind of future they wanted to have. And it was a close vote. And in the end, the no vote, the leave vote, came through. And it's been challenging for Britain to carve out a new set of relationships with Europe. I mean, it takes time to unravel 40 years of a single market integration.
It has a lot of implications.
and we're still on that journey, but I think we're making good progress. The Northern Ireland Protocol, there's been some really good progress on settling that very tricky bit of the infrastructure, but we're getting there. But I think from a Nigeria point of view, actually, there are opportunities that come from Brexit, because obviously we have more choice now around, particularly on migration, who can come to the UK. We have control over our borders, and indeed many Nigerians have benefited from that. Nigeria is the third biggest student population in the UK. We're benefiting from many talented young entrepreneurs coming to the UK. So, you know, there are opportunities as well as some challenges.
So I'm speaking in the political and the voting sense. And what comes out of such a decision and how much people understand that the decision they make in an election will impact not only on the economy, it will impact on their livelihood generally. And a lot of Nigerians who are watching you tonight, and the reason why I asked the earlier question is perhaps the decision they will be making on Saturday will affect their lives in so many ways. And that's why I was asking for the lesson that Nigerians could learn also in making a dramatic or a very critical decision.
Well, I think I mean, a referendum is very different, obviously, from an election, because it's about one issue, and you focus on
and you have to make a decision.
But the thing that's similar, obviously, is that you should go into an election or a referendum doing your homework and your research and thinking about, you know, does Brexit, how will it affect me personally, my family? And it was a complicated issue, and some people think that shouldn't go to a referendum because it's almost too complicated. But in an election, all the key parties have published their manifestos. I've seen them. What's been quite striking here, actually, is how similar they are. I didn't see huge policy differences amongst the big four. They've all told us they understand the importance of you know, taking those difficult policy decisions. But there are differences, and you know, candidates come with different perspectives, and it's clear the youth have mobilised particularly around one candidate. But in terms of policy, I didn't see a huge set of differences. But the most important thing is people do their research, they think about who overall, which candidate reflects their interest most, who will do do the best for them in the future Nigeria, and they make their choice, and then, but they accept the result. That's the most important thing, and the one thing we do need to worry about in Nigeria, because the sort of flip side of a very close election where there's a lot of engagement is there is a lot at stake. There's no predetermined outcome in this election. That's democracy.
How are you helping Nigeria in this election?
So we've been working with Nigeria for many, many years, over 20 years, to help you put in place the framework for this democracy. So with INEC, we've worked, for example, most recently on the Electoral Act. It was supporting the Electoral Act, which INEC will benefit from, helping them do the training of their various people who will go out on the ground. And we support civil society to have a voice, a loud voice, in terms of holding government to account, passing of the Electoral Act. On the day, we'll support the various situation rooms, including Yaga, the Not Too Young to Run campaign. We support their parallel vote tabulation. So essentially, we support INEC, we've supported the judicial process, and we've supported civil society.
Interesting. You've been putting some pressure, not this time alone, in several elections. And the kind of warning that the British government and the US government, as the signal they're sending, sometimes have its own effect. This time around, you have a position, just like your U.S. counterpart, about those who rig elections. What are those specific decisions you have made in respect of those who you think want to manipulate the process or want to rig the 2023 election?
So we've just had a statement put out by our minister, Andrew Mitchell, who's the Development and Africa Minister. I've got it in front of me. And basically, in short, where the UK is aware of attempts to subvert the democratic process, we are prepared to take action against those who engage in or incite electoral violence, or indeed any other anti-democratic behaviour. And the sanction, we have two sort of tools in our toolbox to sanction. One is a visa ban. We can refuse a visa to travel to the UK for people who are undermining the democratic process. Or for more serious behaviours, we have sanctions under our human rights sanctions regime. So we're watching closely. This is not targeted at any particular political party, any individual. It can be applied to anyone. You mentioned earlier some hate speak, that unfortunately is very live in this Nigeria debate in the run-up to the election. And hate speak can incite violence, and that can be extremely dangerous. So we're watching closely. We can never reveal who's been subject to a visa ban for data protection reasons, but I can confirm we have used this tool, and alongside our US counterparts are prepared to use it again.
It's interesting, though, and I mean, you're not worried about those who believe, those who oppose and think that, our colonial masters are back at it again. You don't think that people have that kind of feeling?
No, I don't think this is interference. I think most people I've spoken to welcome this because everyone has a stake in a peaceful, credible election, most of all the people of Nigeria. So it's undermining everyone's right to vote peacefully, to express their preferences. So we are just playing our part in supporting Nigeria's democratic journey. But this is not interference. This is not our election. It's your election. What
are your biggest fears about this election from what you have observed?
So I think there is a worry around insecurity and violence. So in this pre-election period, the number of pre-election incidents is higher than the last election. There's obviously the day of the election itself and following the presidential, the gubernatorial, where we hope people can go out to vote peacefully. But perhaps most worrying is the post-election period, where we have seen in the past in Nigeria that there's been quite intense post-election violence. So in order to avoid that, what we're urging the heads of the political parties to do is to ensure that their supporters go out and vote, of course, but as I said, accept the result. And if they feel they want to challenge anything, to do so through the courts, through the judicial process, to keep things calm during what is going to be a very closely run election. There's a lot at stake. So that's, I guess, one of my fears and worries. But assuming we can get through that, I think the future looks very bright for Nigeria, with the incoming presidential candidate, whoever it is, tackling those difficult challenges. And the UK, like most of the international community, wants Nigeria to succeed, and we're going to be coming in fully behind you.
Yeah, I mean, we need all the support, don't we? And I mean, seeing the UK as a formidable ally in our democratic development gives someone, I mean, some kind of courage that we can push harder and further. On a final note, I see the old democratic journey as not only a Nigerian journey, as a journey, because if it's good in Nigeria, there is some kind of influence and impact that it makes across the globe, because Nigeria, we have the population, and on the African continent, we are a sample, we are a great example for the continent in terms of democratic process, in terms of our political culture and all of that. I mean, whatever happens here, we see that also being transposed in other parts of the continent. But what would you say is the biggest lesson that you think that this process has brought up in Nigeria? This is an election where you have major candidates have emerged in different parts of the country, and it's a big departure from what we have had in the past.
I think it's that rise of the youth who've recognised a political awakening, you know, who've recognised, and probably linked partly to the NSARS movement, has found a direction in this election to channel that energy, that desire for their voice to be heard in Nigeria. Nigeria is a young country. It is still ruled by relatively elderly people. And I think that voice has now been found, and that's going to be so important and a real positive. And the elderly, who we all respect, and we're all becoming older, need to allow space for the youth to come through. And I would also mention importance of women, and that is something, sadly, Nigeria is backsliding on. Nigerian women are successful in all walks of life. Just last week, we were celebrating through International Women's Day Gala Award that the female ambassadors here in Nigeria have put together. Amazing, successful women in the media, in law, in everything, but not in politics, because it's just too difficult. You know, the people who secured these positions in the National Assembly, mostly men, do not want women to come through, sadly. There are exceptions. There are some really good he for she's. But there's only one female gubernatorial candidate. It's just not good enough. So the big lesson for Nigeria as well is, like, embrace this inclusion, embrace the youth, embrace women, and that's where Nigeria really will succeed.
For the person who becomes the winner of this election, what message do you have for such a person?
Be bold. Take those tough decisions and take them early. Have courage, and we'll come in behind you.
Interesting. And perhaps one thing that is here is the message, the fact that whoever becomes Nigeria's next president may not have the magic wand to erase all of the problems. But what would you say, you've been around for some time in this country, and as a diplomat, you definitely have a lot of information. What would you say the next president should focus on as a priority?
Well, I think it's got to be the economy, number one, because that's what's holding Nigeria back. And as I mentioned, I think the economy failing is also causing a lot of the insecurity. Not all of the insecurity, but a large part of it. So there are, you know, 2 or 3 key decisions an incoming president has to take. Number one is to remove the fuel subsidy, which is draining the fiscus, but to do it in a way that protects poor people. Secondly, to tackle the multiple exchange rates. You know, businesses just will not invest in this country if they can't secure their foreign exchange. And 3, raise taxes. You have one of the lowest tax ratios in the modern world. Without raising revenue, you can't invest in public services, and in public services, infrastructure, education is key to the future. But the other point I just wanted to emphasize again is whoever comes in, build a strong, inclusive team with young people, with women in your team at the top table. Bring all that talent together and reach out to other political parties. A strong, inclusive team to help you and support you as a leader in what's going to be a pretty enormous set of challenges.
You mentioned security as one of the challenges. It obviously is. The question is the British government doing enough to assist?
Well, we've been supporting the Nigerian government for many years, particularly since the horrible incident with the taking of the Chibok girls. So we do a lot of training of your military, particularly around how to conduct operations in a human rights compliant way. And we support the military in understanding it. It's not just a kinetic approach, it's non-kinetic as well, drawing on very long experience we've had in Northern Ireland, in Iraq, in Afghanistan and so on. So we've got a very strong security and defence partnership. We take stock every 6 months. The next one to round off with this administration will be in April, actually, and then we're preparing the groundwork to do more on counter-terrorism, on cyber security, on serious organised crime with an incoming administration, listening to where they want us to focus and hopefully scaling up our support.
Thank you so much, Katrina Lang, for talking to us. Is this going to be one of your major final events before you leave the country? I mean, the expiration of your time as a British High Commissioner. But I must thank you so much for gracing our studio tonight. Thank you so much indeed. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been a great pleasure.
It's good to see you. Thank you so much.